Welcome to Business Over Borders. I'm your host, Leo, and we're here for an emergency edition of Business Over Borders. I'm joined by Matt Steinbrecher, and we're here to talk today about tariffs. It's hot. It's all over the news. Donald Trump enacted tariffs on Mexico, Canada, and China, some of which are on hold, and we're here to talk about it. Matt, good morning.
How we doing? It's been a fun week.
We're a little terrified, you could say, but overall pretty well. So what's going on? Tell us a little bit about what's happening.
Yeah, so pretty clear mandate from the Trump administration that they are trying to, you can speculate all you want, but ultimately what they're trying to do is enable tariffs on international trade and imports that are coming into the U.S. And they're going to start being implemented, well, they have been implemented, but they will start being implemented even for those that have been delayed faster and faster. And we are going to see the biggest shift in consumer experience that the U.S. has really ever seen, ultimately since probably Amazon enabled one day or next day shipping for us. So It's going to be a big shakeup.
So I see a couple of scenarios on the horizon. One, like you mentioned, it's a bit of political posturing. It's a bargaining chip. It's just to ruffle everybody's feathers, and, the tariffs in Canada and Mexico don't go through. Now, scenario two is that they do, and all of a sudden we see, 20% tariffs, to America's neighbors. What does that mean for merchants, for consumers? Like, what's the downstream effect of this, short term and long term, if we want to go there too?
Basically, kind of taking a step back, the way that tariffs work is there is an organization that a bunch of countries around the world, like most countries, subscribe to, called the World Trade Organization. And in the World Trade Organization, they classify every different type of product, where the product is made. At least 50% or more of the products is actually manufactured and assembled, and the goods are sourced from, as well as, where the product is being shipped from. They call this a harmonization code. And basically all of these countries, there's 100 plus countries that are subscribed, let's say to the WTO or members of the WTO, they all work together to basically have a universal classification of goods. And then, of course, you have, within that, you have negotiations and treaties between countries. So like in the 90s, Clinton enabled NAFTA between Mexico and Canada and the US to basically open up our borders. That was a pretty critical play for, transportation and logistics of imports coming from Mexico and Canada to be much more seamless. Whereas previously, like every single truck that was coming across the border was being stopped, checked, inspected, figuring out what the harmonization codes of the products that were in that truck, making sure that the right duties and taxes were collected from it, and then making sure that the federal government got their duty cost on that. So that was kind of the bit of a history around what tariffs are, harmonization codes, and then ultimately the history of trade between the U.S. and Canada and Mexico. Now that agreement was updated recently and ultimately has now basically been very quickly abolished through the Trump administration quickly. What happened first? 25% tariff was implemented on all goods coming in from Canada and Mexico into the U.S.
Right.
Basically what that means is all Canadian-made products, so maple syrup that I might buy from up north and get shipped to me here in Texas, I would now have to pay 25% more for that particular Canadian-made product that I traditionally would not have paid. So what does that mean? It means the retailer basically has to charge me 25% more. Whoever I'm buying it from on the website has to charge me 25% more. So ultimately, the cost is passed to the consumer. Now, some businesses may mask that cost and inflate the cost of good to the consumer, so the consumer doesn't have to see it. But really, the consumer is always going to be the one to pay for this. So it's really a tax on imports coming into the U.S., which Trump has utilized as a negotiation tactic to get other things in his agenda. And of course, that it just recently changed. So within just a few days, Mexico agreed to strengthen the border between the U.S. and Mexico, which was one of the demands that came from Trump, and sent 10,000 troops and did a few other things. Basically, they decided that they were going to delay these tariffs because that type of impact on the Mexican economy would be huge. Ultimately, what happens is U.S. consumers say, "Oh, that's made in Mexico. It's 25% more. I don't want to buy it. I'll buy it from the U.S."
Right.
Same thing with Canada, right?
Right. And merchants start sourcing goods from other countries that are manufactured in other countries as well. So it's quite the domino effect.
You just start to get consumers that will slowly boycott buying products that they know have inflated cost that is literally just a tariff on them, where typically consumers are buying things from different countries because they're either very unique and they're willing to pay a higher price, or they're cheaper than buying it from their domestic country.
Sure.
The main thing is that Mexico very quickly came in and basically decided that they were going to negotiate versus let these tariffs get implemented right away. Now, Canada took a bit of a different approach and basically immediately countered with also 25% tariffs, which really is a lose-lose situation. At the time, it was kind of a pissing contest between two world leaders, one who just came into power and one who has made it public that he's walking out of power. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic between traditionally two very friendly countries, and the world leaders' negotiation ultimately de-escalated a bit, and they delayed the implementation of tariffs, as we did with Mexico. But make no mistake that those were not abolished. So those tariffs are still coming. The time of which they are implemented to consumers is unknown, right? So I think they did about 30 days. They pushed it out. 30 days is not a lot of time.
No, we'll be hearing about this pretty quickly again.
Yeah, I suspect it's going to come with more demands, more threats. It's really, the Trump administration is leveraging the dominance of the U.S. consumer against some of our import trade partners who have heavy exports to us in the U.S. here, and a very large demand of their economy is based on U.S. consumers.
So I want to make a quick distinction here between direct imports and indirect imports. And just to give you an example, if you've got a Canadian business selling a product made in Canada, sent over to the U.S. to whoever buys it, that has, potentially a 25% markup on it. Now, what happens in the case? That would be a direct import. Now, an indirect import where you're manufacturing, the same business in Canada has a product that they have manufactured in China. They import in, then they ship over to the U.S. That's a bit of a different story. You want to talk a little bit about direct versus indirect?
Where things get really complicated outside of the Canada-Mexico tariffs is the Chinese tariffs, because so much of the products around the world are made in China.
Oh, yeah.
My iPhone ultimately is made in China, but it says assembled in California. But it really, everything that you have, there's just so much, probably 80% of the products that you look around the room, so much of it is manufactured by China. And they are just a dominant powerhouse globally for manufacturing across a lot of different industries. So what happens if you have a Canadian, let's say fashion company that's selling into the US, but all of their products are made in China. Their clothes are made in China, manufactured in China. Basically what you've got is, it doesn't matter that, the trade between, like the tariffs between the US and Canada for now have de-escalated and we remain under free trade agreements for most industries. It matters that the product is made in China. So because of the fact that the product is made in China, coming back to these harmonization codes, there's two things that classify the product. So like the t-shirt that I'm wearing has up to a 22-digit alphanumeric code that basically classifies it as a t-shirt made of, 75% polyester, 25% cotton, whatever. It's blue.
Yeah.
Whatever it's made of, there are these very intricate details that basically classify what exactly that product is. The other classification that comes with a harmonization code is the country of origin. Where was it manufactured and assembled? More than 50% of it, at least, or the majority of it, if it's under 50%. And that's where it would be China for, again, most of our products.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, let's pick on some Canadian retailer like Hudson Bay or something, right?
Sure.
And they're shipping into the US. If their products are made in China, they now will be subject to import tariffs that are implemented on China by the Trump administration. It has nothing to do with the Canadian import tariffs. It has everything to do with the Chinese import tariffs into the US.
Right.
Because what the way that tariffs are designed, the reason why these harmonization codes classify what the product is, but also where it's been made, is because before they had this type of designation, it would be very easy to move a product that has a tariff. If you have a tariff on China, but you don't have a tariff on Canada.
Yeah, to ship everything to Canada. Sure.
Ship it to Canada and then ship it into the US from there.
So it's made in Canada. That's great.
Exactly.
Maple leaves on everything.
You could build this like sneaky supply chain that's just ultimately moving away from tariffs, but that's the whole reason of why these products and services products are classified with the country of origin, because that allows the government to track the exact place that they were manufactured and then implement the tariffs on that import.
And these sort of indirect tariffs, they stack. Is that correct? So if you've got in your scenario where you're ordering dresses from China, those get shipped over to Canada, and then those Canadian products get exported to the U.S., is that then a 35% tariff?
So it is probably about 35%, but not for the reason that you're thinking. So the common misconception is when the tariff is implemented on Canada, for example, it's based on Canadian-made goods. Now, Canada's not known for a ton of exports outside of oil and lumber, but
right.
like let's go back
raw
when
materials.
It comes to when it comes to like retail, consumers, right? But let's go back to the maple syrup example.
Yeah, I don't buy a lot of ore.
Yeah. If I want to buy a case of maple syrup as an everyday consumer, because I, for whatever reason, need that much maple syrup, maybe I have a reason. The experience that I will have with Canada, because it's a Canadian-made product and it's fully made in Canada, the country of origin of that maple syrup is Canada. Right now, there will be no tariffs. In 30 days from now, I might have to pay 25% more. However, if I buy a t-shirt from a Canadian retailer that is manufactured in China, one thing that a lot of people don't realize is that the tariffs are increasing on Chinese goods by 10%, but the tariffs already existed. So what's happening now is that package will get stopped at the border, not because it's coming from Canada. It's because it's made in China. Now, if I were buying that maple syrup and my t-shirt that was made in China from the same retailer in the same package, even though there's a free trade agreement between the maple syrup, basically, right, the
Canadian product,
and there's tariffs on the shirt, the package will get stopped and the tariffs will still be collected on the shirt at the U.S. customs border, which is a terrible experience. So it basically means if you're buying something, if there's anything, like if you throw a gimme, if you're like a retailer in Canada and you're selling to U.S. consumers and you throw like a gimme product in there, that's like, I don't know, some gadget that's like $2 or something, right? And you're just like, oh, here's a freebie because you spent over $200.
Yeah, some kind of little swag or something, yeah.
Exactly, but if that product is made in China, the entire package will be stopped now. Even if it was handmade and knitted in Canada or Toronto or whatever, it will still get stopped now because there's one product in there that has a country of origin of China. And so it could basically, impact your entire package. So let me unpack this a little bit with the numbers. When we look at that example, that's kind of the probably more extreme and confusing thing. So if we take it a step back, let's just look at Chinese retailers that ship into the US today. So what happened with China? Trump basically said China's going to have a 10% increase in tariffs. It doesn't mean that we went from 0 to 10%.
No, they were already tariffed.
Correct. So China's already had a pretty significant amount of tariffs implemented, and it's very different across, again, harmonization codes. So jewelry might be very different from apparel, which might be different from, shoes, which might be different from steel, right? So there's all these different industries, and focusing on retail, of course, even within the retail sector, it's going to swing quite a bit based on what you're making. So like if you buy Nikes, they are made in China. The retail price you're buying in the US on your Nike shoes, like that includes tariffs that were already paid at the border coming into the US. And this is prior to these new tariffs being implemented.
Yeah, the status quo is the way it was, 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, exactly. Now, if you were buying and having it shipped directly from China or anything that was purchased from China, basically, the tariffs were included. But if it was shipped directly from China, the tariffs were exempt because it was under what's called a de minimis value. Now, the de minimis value is an $800 amount, which basically means if there's an order, like a shipment that's coming in from China that is under $800, no duties will be collected on that shipment.
Right. And I imagine that's an administrative function too, because you don't, you're sending over a fidget spinner or something, like you just don't want to take up, customs time, going through there and say, oh, well, this $13 item now has to be checked and we've got 10 million of them, sitting there. If it's under 800
Exactly.
bucks, send it through.
Exactly. So if you have like your, in a fidget spinner example, right? Realistically, the tariffs on that fidget spinner, even though it's like let's say a $10 item, imagine shipping is free. The current tariffs on that would be about, let's call it 25% for that fidget spinner. That's what it is, or was as a few days ago. It was about 25% on those. But because the US doesn't care about collecting 25% on a $10 item, it's too much, as you said, administrative work to be able to stop all those packages, clear them, get the 25%. It's just not worth the US's time to collect $2.50 on a $10 order.
Yeah, makes sense.
So what they did was implement the de minimis rule. And this is, again, direct to consumer packages being shipped from China into the US. It was an $800 de minimis. So if it was over $800 fidget spinners, now you're going to pay duties. You're going to pay that 25% tariff on it. If it's under $800, it goes through, you don't pay anything. So if you go into an example of, like, let's say a wholesaler of fidget spinners, they might buy 10,000 fidget spinners and import them in bulk into the US. They are paying 25% tariffs, but they're paying 25% tariffs on the cost of the fidget spinner, which is like $1, right? Where the retail price of the fidget spinner is $10. So if you can follow, there's two paths that I want to illustrate. And the first is like direct to consumer, and the second is the wholesale and B2B. The wholesale side is significantly easier because when you're clearing those fidget spinners in, 25% of $1 is a hell of a lot less than 25% of $10. In fact, it's 10 times less because it's the manufacturing value. It's not the retail value, because they're taking 10,000 units, bringing them into the US, putting them in a warehouse in the US, and then fulfilling it locally from the US. So it's a very different type of business model, right? They're not shipping directly from China into the States. With that business model, those tariffs have always applied. When you buy that $10 fidget spinner locally in the US, it's from that US importer, you won't, the cost inflation to you is what, 2.5 cents versus $2.50, right? So it's a significantly different, or rather, 25, versus $2.50. So it's a significantly different scale of the absorbed cost by the consumer because it's been bulk imported. Now, what happened? 10% increase. That's what happened as of earlier this week. Now, that 25% is 35%. But again, if you're importing for $1 and you're paying 25 cents as your tariffs, now you're paying 35 cents. A 10% increase in that cost to a bulk importer who's already fulfilling locally for Chinese-made goods in the US is not going to have a material impact on the ultimate $10 retail price that the retailer sells it. Now, here's what retailers that are doing this model are going to do. They're going to increase their prices by 10%, right?
Sure.
They, even if it's not the actual respective increase to their prices, because they're importing at the $1 and selling at the $10, they're still going to charge you $11 now because it's predatory pricing, right? This is capitalism. This is the way that our consumer market works. So again, what happens in this B2B scenario where it's already being imported in bulk, the US consumer is going to take a hit on that impact of the cost increase. That's not even the part that's scary. That's just the part that is pretty status quo. We've had tariffs on Chinese made goods for a very long time. They've gone up and down, lots of
Yep.
different sectors. There's
Tariffs
a lot of
go up,
movement.
tariffs go down. Yeah, we've
Yeah,
seen it
it's
before.
pretty common. It's really common. There's no, there's no major shift to business, industry, and trade there. So let's go to what happens when that fidget spinner now gets shipped from China. Now it is the declared value on the package, which is the retail value. So if I go on
what I pay for it online, yep, at fidgetspinners.com, yep.
Totally, right? Or like AliExpress or any of the big Chinese marketplaces, and I buy from them, Temu, and I buy from them, and it's a $10 item. They now have to ship it to me as $10. And now here's the crazy part. The elimination of this de minimis for everyday consumers, right? Businesses know how to bulk import. They understand how to do that and deal with tariffs and work with customs.
They got teams and working to make sure that gets across the border without issue.
Yeah, that's why they make a $9 spread on a fidget spinner. That's what they do, right? When you're buying direct from China now, which a lot of people do unknowingly and sometimes knowingly, right? So what's happening now is that retail value is $10. The de minimis threshold of 800 is entirely removed, which means now your package gets stopped at the border. Customs agent scans the package, says this is made in China, fidget spinner, it's worth $10. That's how much it was sold to the consumer for. You owe 35% tariffs now. Previously, it would have been 25%. So even alone, the disruption to the economy and to global trade is just the removal of the de minimis value. The tariff increase is relatively trivial.
It's kind of business as usual, really. I mean, it's
exactly, yeah.
It makes things more expensive, no doubt, but we've seen it before.
It's an impact, but it's not an impact that like really impacts everyday consumers. Like they'll just see prices go up, and yeah, it's not great, right? Because we've been living in a pretty inflationary economy, particularly in the U.S. recently. You wouldn't see it as much. Where you're going to get really impacted is that $10 item. Now you are going to get a slip from your delivery guy, right? FedEx, UPS, USPS, DHL, whoever you're getting delivered from. Typically, they're going to leave something on your door that basically says, so you owe us $3.50 for this fidget spinner that you bought online for $10. Most people in the U.S. have no idea why they would get that package and why all of a sudden someone would try to collect more money from them.
No, it's a huge amount of friction. Not only am I surprised at a new cost, I got to probably drive somewhere, to a post office, which I assume I have in my neighborhood, and go pay some fee that I wasn't expecting to pay on my fidget spinner.
Yeah, and I mean, Canadians are used to this for U.S. imports, but U.S. consumers are not used to this. A lot of countries are very used to this flow of consumer experience as it relates to import duties, but the U.S. doesn't have this because of this de minimis rule. So now what's that person going to do? Like, would you pay $3.50 on top of a $10 fee for a fidget spinner? No, you probably wouldn't. So you'd say,
I was only half in at $10. I'm gonna be honest with you.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So it's like, okay, well, there's no way I'm going to pay that. So like, I don't want it anymore. Yeah. So what am I doing? I just don't want it. I don't care about the $10, but I'm not paying $3.50. Now get this too. The cost, all of these logistics companies, right? The actual shipping carriers. So USPS, UPS, FedEx, DHL, you name it. They didn't know. I mean, they kind of knew this was coming, but they didn't have lead time to build infrastructure for this to actually get pushed through in a seamless manner. So guess what they're having to do? Their delivery truck guys, who they have to pay salaries to and pay overtime for shipment, and they have to pay the time of their employees, they're now going to charge, and they need to store your fidget spinner until you pay that $3.50, and then they can give it back to you. Maybe they'll deliver it back on their next round in your neighborhood, or you come pick it up from the post office, right? So there's a cost for them to store the item. There's a cost for them to communicate to the end customer about the delivery fee for duties, which is this $3.50. And of course, then there's administrative costs for them to figure out how to automate all that stuff very quickly.
Oh, nightmarish.
Right. Which means they need to stop everything else they're doing in their business, and there's opportunity cost in that. So what are they going to do? They're going to implement what we call a final mile delivery fee, which is basically like it's like a surcharge to the shopper, which is basically going to say you're also going to pay us, UPS or FedEx, because that $3.50 is going to the federal government of the United States. It's not going in the pocket of a private company that's delivering the product. So they're going to say, by the way, you also owe us $5 for your time.
Yeah.
So we bought a fidget spinner for $10. Previously, it would have been $10 delivered to our door and however long it took to ship. Now we get implemented with a $3.50 tariff plus a $5 delivery fee. And $5 is pretty low, to be totally honest with you. So we bought a fidget spinner for $10 and ended up paying $18.50 for it in total, with time allocated, because we have to communicate to the carrier and pay the money somehow, and so now you have to deal with all that, which is super fun.
That's right. My fidget spinner sales business just took a hit. It's not working out anymore.
Yeah, it's super impactful. People are going to feel this pain this week, and especially next week, as products start to clear in from China and packages start getting stopped. So this is the biggest shakeup in consumer behavior, kind of coming back to my initial point. It's the biggest shakeup in consumer behavior in the US that we have ever seen, negatively, at least in my lifetime.
Right. So, I mean, we wanted to get this podcast out to talk about it, but not just to bring doom and gloom. Like, if this is the way the world is, we got to adapt, we got to adjust. So obviously there's going to be a lot of chaos at the border, chaos, for customers, confusion for merchants. What is there to do? Like, what can merchants do who are selling goods that maybe are manufactured in China, maybe moving across the border from Canada or Mexico into the U.S.? What's best practice here, to avoid, chargebacks and things like that from people being surprised by their significant increase on their fidget spinners or maple syrup, whatever you're.
Yeah. So your costs are going up for consumers. The consumers don't understand why those costs are going up. Thankfully, our media does a great job of making it in our face every day with headlines. Mm-hmm. So they'll probably have an idea as to why, but they truly don't understand the mechanics behind it. And they're just going to assume that the retailer is trying to charge them more. They'll be upset. They'll demand a refund or reject the good or issue a chargeback. It'll be a huge nightmare for retailers. So how do you combat it? The best way, import your products in bulk into the U.S. and start fulfilling locally here. That process takes months for most businesses. It's also incredibly costly because now, if I previously had my fidget spinners stored in a warehouse in China, which I sell all over the world, not just in the U.S., I need to take a section of that inventory or duplicate a section of that inventory and bring it into the U.S. in bulk, have a warehouse, whether I lease it or outsource it to a third party or buy it myself. I now have to pay for warehouse space. And now I'm pack shipping from the US, which is significantly more costly just from a labor perspective than it is doing it in China. All of that is super impactful and still very disruptive to my business and will still increase my cost to my US consumers, because now I need to implement all these things, which has hard cost of resource allocation. But that is the best thing to do. Right now with the fidget spinners, okay, not that big. It's small. It's a small product, but if we're talking about like retail and apparel, especially things that are seasonal, this is a pretty big shakeup. So what we're going to start to see here is more businesses scrambling. Most of the businesses that I've been talking to are really looking and trying to scramble to find a local fulfillment center quickly that they can get up and running with. And these are retailers that are based, mind you, in Canada, in the UK, in Australia, in Singapore, in Germany. It doesn't matter where they're based. If their products are made in China, when those products are shipped from a UK warehouse in London, shipping in to me in Texas, because it was made in China, I now have a 25%, 35%, it could be up to like 65, 75% tariff as a consumer on that product. And that never existed before. This wasn't a problem before, right? So for those that have very high tariffs, they somehow need to absorb those costs so that they can basically make sure that it's a seamless shipping experience for the customer. So what we walk through in that experience where the cost is absorbed is DDU. So for these businesses, right, what are their options? Like I said, they can go open a 3PL in the US. That's not fast. If they just ship the way they've been shipping, where they pass this cost of duties to the consumer while they're setting up their local warehouse, let's say,
right?
If they just pass the cost of duties to the consumer, and the consumer has to pay it through their mailman, and they're never going to compete. No one will ever buy from them again, and they will have massive downstream impacts to their business. So what they need to do very short term, like yesterday, is implement what's called DDP, duties delivery paid. That basically allows them to increase the cost of shipping by 25, 35, 45%, whatever the cost is for the duty tariff on their particular products being shipped into the US that are made in China. Again, even if they're based in the UK, Canada, and Australia, wherever they are.
Doesn't matter. Made in China.
Right, made in China. They now need to bake that into the retail price so that when it's shipped through the carrier, the duties have already been paid. So when it hits U.S. Customs and they scan that box, they're going to be like, oh, okay, well, the duties are paid on this. Like it goes through.
Yeah. Yeah, that way, I mean, you're still seeing the price increase, but you don't have the border friction. You don't have the, how do I pay this, duty fee friction. So you can't avoid the cost. So
it's more the friction for the consumer experience, even though the cost is going to dramatically increase. So we're going to see we're going to see a lot of packages getting stopped, assuming things stay the way they are with China. If the de minimis value stays removed or at zero, let's say, we will see massive impact to trade in the very short term that is going to drastically stimulate U.S. spending from U.S. made goods or non-Chinese made goods from other countries. And we will see dramatic dips in basically spending in China, exports from China. So it's a very interesting play here, but ultimately I think retailers need to either look at bulk importing. They for sure should be shipping duties paid today to be able to minimize the impact to shoppers. And that's basically your two options at this point. Or you do nothing and intentionally let your shoppers know this is what's going on. Our prices will be increased by X, which probably makes it so it's too expensive for you to want to purchase it anyway. And they intentionally take the dip in their sales to wait and see how things shake out. Things are changing every day. So we have no idea what it's going to look like in a week from now. So we're going to have to make a few of these probably as things.
This is a fast moving target. I think the news has been different every day this week. We're sort of sitting on the edge of our seats here, seeing what the Trump administration is going to do and how, the affected countries are going to respond. So stay tuned. Matt, thanks for joining me. We'll stay on top of this and see how things develop. And that's it for Business Over Borders. If you like what you saw today, go ahead and like this video or subscribe. And if you really want to see what we got coming down the line in real time, hit that little bell at the bottom. Thanks.
Brought to you by the Reach Network. Visit withreach.com/network for more.